Hi everyone, I'm the plant propagator and welcome to my channel. Today I want to show you just classical propagation of verbena. And this is a plant, I'm not too familiar with this plant, but familiar enough that I can show you how easy it is to propagate. The way that things work at my house is that either my wife or I goes out and buys plants, we bring them back and try them and just see how they do in the local environment. And their successes and failures as you have. And the successes are what then get passed back to me to try propagation of, and I've been pretty successful. Many of the plants that are in my yard I propagated. I bought them and they did well. Sometimes I just get gifts from friends, just cuttings that I then try, and then once they do well, then I continue to propagate those and share more of those or spread them throughout my small yard here in Southwest Florida. Verbena is one of those plants that just has done really well, and it so happens that it's very, very simple to propagate. Before we get going though, what I want to also share with you is a little bit about my background. So I am the plant propagator, but more importantly, I am a propagator. I worked at a major U.S. university in a tissue culture / propagation lab. I worked on soybean biotechnology, but I also worked on a number of different plants, some ornamental, some in the floriculture trade, and I'm just good at propagation, and I understand the physiology of propagation and what happens and how you should treat the cuttings or the explants and how they will perform the best for you. So what I'm going to do is share a little bit more detail than what you might normally get on other channels and in other videos on what's involved in propagation and why it works, and I'll share with you some of the results. So give you a little bit of a additional or deeper insight into what is going on and how to propagate your plants successfully. Today we're doing verbena, but it happens that you can do this with many different plants. And it works pretty effectively. And usually what I do, if I have a plant that I want to, that I like, that's doing well here, then I will try to propagate that plant using pretty much the same standard protocol, and it works well for obvious reasons. And like I said before, I'm in Southwest Florida, so it's always warm here. It's most of the time it's humid, and I'll give you some ideas for how you can propagate plants in if you're in other environments, or if you want to propagate a plant inside your house. I'll give you some additional information on what conditions or what you have to do differently from what I'm doing here that will enable you to do the same thing. All right, so let's go into the background of verbena and what I'm working on. So this is a kind of a low-growing, really floriferous plant. The one specifically that I'm going to be propagating today is a red form. And there's a few different red forms that are out there, and they go from periods where they'll produce a lot of flowers till where they kind of bloom out and then kind of rejuvenate and spread out some more and make some more flowers. This is from a plant that is in front of my house that gets maybe around 4 hours of light a day, but this is Southwest Florida light that tends to be really strong. So this plant is doing pretty well. It doesn't have as many flowers on it as it did a couple of weeks ago, but it still does very well in this local environment. But you can use the same type of protocols. They come in different colors, so there's pinks, there are lavenders and purples, so there's a few different colors that are out there, but they'll all work pretty much the same way. All right, what I'm going to show you is propagation from cuttings. That works most easily, and when you do that, you're guaranteed to have, you're essentially cloning the plant, and you're guaranteed to have the same plant as you started with. It's pretty simple like that, and if it performs well for you in one location, you can continue to grow it in that location or try different locations, which is what I tend to do. So what I've done is I've made cuttings of verbena, and those cuttings are in this jar right here in water. And what I'd like to do when I make cuttings is put it in water immediately. When you make cuttings like this and like this, you're cutting the roots off of this plant. So it's a little stressful, and it's a little bit of a shock for this plant. You're removing it from its source of water. And you need to consider that as you're propagating this plant. Again, there's no roots, and what we're trying to do is force formation or induction of new root initials that will then grow out. A lot of people will do this, will just take something like this and put it in water and let it go. And this works, and you'll get root formation, but then eventually it's got to go in soil. So what I prefer to do is just root it directly in soil. It works very efficiently to do it like this. And many of the tricks are the same, and I think it's better to propagate directly in soil. And what I use is a soilless mix. So let me tell you first about the mix, and then I'll show you how you prepare your cuttings for propagation. So the mix that I use is Miracle-Gro Moisture Control Potting Mix, and this is good stuff. This is the main brand that's available at most of the stores. So you can get this at Walmart, at Home Depot, and at Lowe's, and most of the big box stores will have this. The moisture control is nice because this is a potting medium where there are little moisture absorbing and releasing particles or beads that are in the mix. So it stays moist. Moisture control, it stays moist in between waterings. It won't get, but also when you water too much, it doesn't really get too waterlogged. So it's a really nice mix. Also, there are things, this works really well. A lot of times if you use another brand or another type, you'll have problems with rotting. That's one of the biggest issues, because you're just sticking your cutting into moist soil. And so the cutting can rot. And this mix, for some reason, there's something in there, maybe it's the specific type of peat moss that they're using, there doesn't seem to be the same level of rotting. So it's good moisture control, and you don't seem to be having rotting issues. So this is Miracle-Gro brand moisture control potting medium. It's a little more expensive than many of the other types that you can get, but I strongly recommend this stuff. This is just good stuff, and it works really well for me in propagation over and over again. Okay, so this is the potting mix that I use, and a little bit goes a long way. I added this potting mix to these 2 pots. We're just doing 2 pots today. And then right after I add the potting mix, I water. I get things moist. It comes a little wet, but I make sure and get the potting mix really wet. So it's dripping out the bottom. So this stuff is wet. And again, a lot of people are concerned when you have things too wet, you'll get rot. But I don't seem to have that issue with this potting mix with the plants that I'm going to do. Okay, so that's the potting mix, and I usually like to pre-wet it. We'll also wet it after we put the cuttings in there. The cuttings are this, and they're small, and there's no roots on them, as you might imagine. This one happens to have a spent flower on it, so we're gonna take that off. And if there's any flowers that are forming, you're going to take those off. The idea behind preparing this cutting is that you're trying to minimize the stress of the whole cutting process. And then what I do, and what is recommended, is that you remove most of the leaves. So here, and it depends on the cutting. So here I'm going to remove, so there were only 6 leaves on here. I've removed 3 of them. I probably could remove this one right here as well. And the reason that you remove the leaves is because leaves act as a source of the biggest area of water loss occurs through the leaves, through a process called transpiration. It's essentially the evaporation of water from the leaves. And what it normally does in the plant, as the water evaporates from plants, it pulls new water up from the soil, new water and nutrients. So at this point, we have to put all the energy into root formation and plant formation from this cutting. So we remove the leaves so that there'll be less water loss from transpiration, and there'll be less of a shock. It still is a shock, but there'll be less of a shock on the plants. All right, so this is the cutting right here. It's pretty small, and we'll do this over and over again. The next thing that I'll do, and I'm going to put 3 cuttings in each of these 2 containers here. So what I do is just a stick, a pencil, anything. I just make 3 holes in the soil, in the moistened soil, and then I will take this. This has been sitting in water, so the bottom of this cutting is wet, and then I will dip this into rooting powder. This is rooting powder. This is garden safe take root, which contains very low levels of a plant growth regulator, plant hormone, isobutyric acid, or IBA. And what IBA does, it's a naturally occurring plant hormone. It induces, at this concentration, it induces root formation. And 99% of this, 99.9% of this is other ingredients. So it's very low concentrations of this plant hormone. 99.9% is this white powder that I hope you can see here. So the white powder sticks to the roots. In the old days, they used to put fungicide in there. They don't do that anymore. So this just contains a carrier and a very low concentrations of a plant hormone. And again, what you're trying to do, what the hormone will do, is it'll induce root formation. This same hormone also inhibits root elongation. So it stimulates induction, but it inhibits elongation. But by that time, the naturally occurring factors in the plant and in the soil will degrade that. So you'll get root induction, then this IBA disappears, and then you will get root elongation. And that's essentially the story here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over and over again with these other cuttings. So it's the same type of thing. And I'm going to eliminate the leaves from this. And in this one, I'm going to eliminate all the big leaves. And this is kind of hard to do, not physically, but it's hard because you're taking this thing and you're pulling most of the leaves, you're pulling off the plant just to leave a stick that looks like this. But you're going to have, well, you can try it yourself. This works. This unquestionably works. So you got to take this that looks like, and this is probably around 4 inches long. They're small cuttings, so you can get a lot of these from the plant. And then I'll pull off all the leaves, and there's some of the basal axillary buds are growing out. I'm going to pull those off. Here is a newly formed flower right here, gone. And so what you're left with is this. Now this is also, this looks like a nice cutting, but I'm going to make it not nice. And now there's hardly anything left on here. And same thing, dip this in the rooting powder and then place it in here. And then I just kind of push the soil around the cutting right here. So this is what you have. I'm going to do the last 3 and speed it up without talking, and then I'll show you the final steps. All right, so that was the same thing over again. I just did another 3 cuttings here. So what I have in each of these pots are 3 cuttings. The soil has been just pushed down, firmed around a little bit. But in order to really get the soil to fill in the spaces in the hole that I made, I'm just going to water it one more time. And this kind of helps to, and I watered it a lot, but this kind of helps to, again, make sure that the soil compacts around the base of the cutting more efficiently. Now here in Southwest Florida, I would call this done. I would just put this in the shade and outside is where I do my cuttings here. So it's just in the shade, it gets irrigated, it gets watered 3 days a week under my irrigation system at my house. But in some environments, I understand you can't do that. If it's cold or if something else is going on, if the humidity is very low, that's something you can't do. So if you have that type of environment where you can't just put these, directly outside under very high humidity outside conditions, you can create essentially a humidity tent. So you can put these in a clear container. What I did when I lived in the Midwest is I just took this is just a sandwich bag right here, and I would take this and wrap this around the pot that I was using. And I don't think I even need the next thing I was going to show you. I have a rubber band, so you can attach this bag with a rubber band to your container like this. And then you can actually just kind of reach under here and blow it up. And this creates a high humidity dome space to have it inside, and then put something underneath it, and you can just put it like this in a not too sunny window, but in a bright light window, and it should just do well like this if you have low humidity conditions. Here in Southwest Florida, I just can grow it like, just like this outside, and that works really well. Okay, what do you expect? What is the next step here, and what can you expect from these cuttings? Well, these are cuttings that I made from this same plant. I think probably about maybe a month ago at the most. And these, this is what it started at a month ago, and this is what it is now. So these grew like crazy. There are 3 cuttings in here. Each of the cuttings grew, but then more importantly, all the axillary buds, the buds that are in the axis of the old leaves, those are even growing out. So there's even multiple shoots coming out. And this is what happens. These things will grow out and they'll vine and they'll keep on splitting apart, and you'll get lots of different divisions coming off of that plant. But if you take a look at this, we're gonna turn this over and take a look at it. I haven't done this yet, but as you might imagine, as you see here, there's just lots of roots that are being formed. And this is ready. They can go a little bit longer, so I've seen cuttings where it's just a mass of roots right here, but it's okay. These are big enough. It's okay I'm gonna actually plant these next to the plant that's in my front yard, but this thing is ready to go. So after just a very short amount of time, this is ready. Now, when you go from, shade conditions to bright sunny conditions, you can transition them, so you can put it in the pot close to it for a little while, see how it does. You can transition it gradually. I'm probably just gonna throw this in the garden that this plant came from, but maybe in a shadier part of that garden, so it can acclimate more gradually. But it was outside here in mostly shade, but some sun, this plant. So I think it'll be okay when I continue to place it outside. All right, so that's all I have for you today. This is very simple, very efficient. Each of the cuttings, sometimes this doesn't work like this. Sometimes not all of the cuttings will form roots and will grow out like this one did. And that's okay. Success rate of 100% is great, but sometimes you'll lose 1 or 2 for various reasons. But this is just a really simple plant to propagate, and it's a beautiful plant too. And you know, make more for free and spread them all over your house. Give them to your neighbors and gardening friends. It's propagation of plants is a wonderful thing to do. It makes me feel good, and the recipients of the plants that I make and give to my friends and colleagues, it makes them feel good too. All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did and you want to keep on seeing them, it would help me out if you can click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right, that's all I have for you. Again, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and happy propagating.